Hey everybody, just finished doing a water change on my 29 miscellaneous here, and my little clown pleco is out. I rarely see this little fish, and it's a cool looking little thing. I put it in there to help keep the tank clean. I had a rubber lip in this tank for about 5 years, and it died recently, and of course as soon as it died I began seeing the tank just get dirtier and dirtier, and the off-walks grew all over everything. And so I got this one. I kept it in quarantine for quite a while. Once I put it in the tank, it has been doing a great job at keeping everything clean. I had to wipe the glass down initially, but once I did, the fish in there has kept everything clean ever since. You can see the wood that it's on and the wood that's next to it. That little faux rock cave right there is sparkling white. Everything in there is nice and clean. That's all from that one fish. They do a great job at keeping the tank clean. So, after doing the water change and after thinking I would get a little bit of that fish on video, I thought since we're here at this tank, we may as well take a little trip around the world. It's been a little while since I've done that, and since this is always our starting point anyway, why not? So, other than what I just talked about, not really a lot going on in this tank. I did do the water change. I did the simple filter change. It's got the hang on the back filter, so swapping out the filter pads is, just really simple. So, I always do that, unlike my canister filters on other tanks, which are a little more involved in doing. So, we're a little more lazy when it comes to doing those. At any rate, that's all we did here is a quick water change. I dumped about 50% out, refilled it, swapped out the filters, and we're good. And as I said, my little chocolate zebra pleco is out there, and I can't believe how still he's sitting. I have seen him move a couple times in the last 10 minutes or so, so I know it's alive. I know it just looks dead lying on the rock like that. It's just really unusual to see it sitting so still. I'm kind of hoping we do get to see it move and swim a little bit. It's almost hard to make out its shape there if you're not really familiar with what you're looking at. And I'm kind of hoping that angelfish right there pecking at that algae wafer will startle it, but it doesn't seem to be. So there you go. Moving on, we got a lot of ground to cover, so we're not going to linger too long on any of these tanks. This is my 55-gallon gourami tank. Not too much going on in this tank that I can think of. I did a water change recently, which, you can pretty much say that for any of my tanks. I do water changes fairly frequently on all of them. Probably not as frequently as once a week, and there's never any kind of serious schedule for me. I just do them when I feel like it's time to do them. Every tank is different. What mood I'm in, and dictates on when I feel like doing it, that sort of thing. But they seldom go more than a couple of weeks at the most without getting at least a quick water change. And the last time I did one on this was a few days ago, and it was a pretty big one. And I thinned out the plants. I trimmed out a lot of the floating water sprite on the left. I removed a few of the longer and taller and larger leaves on the red tiger lotus over here. And I removed a whole bunch of the Java fern up in the top, which I still do have some of that for sale. So again, if you're interested, I just about always have Java fern and water sprite available for sale. So check my email in the description below if you're interested in plants. I also have mystery snails, but we'll get to that in a minute. I got a bunch of mystery snails, but we'll get to that when we get to that tank. So I removed a bunch of that Java fern. You can see that little bit there on the bottom. That's actually growing out of the wood. When I removed all of the Java fern, it all came loose except for that. And this piece here, I just broke off of the main mass. And when I say this piece here, I mean this piece here up the top. I just broke that off the main mass, and you can see where I sort of wedged it back in. That's just kind of sitting there. I could just easily pluck that right off of there. It's not attached to it in any way. It's not really even wedged in to a crack in the wood or anything. It's just sort of sitting there. These little pieces down here are actually growing out of the crack in the wood. The roots are down in that crack, and they've come out on their own over the years of me having Java fern just sort of jammed onto the top of this piece of wood. You can kind of see how it's kind of jagged. There's some cracks in it. It just, to me, it was kind of unattractive by itself, just being exposed wood. And to me, it just needed some greenery at the top. And so I jammed a big piece of Java fern on there 5 years ago, and it's just been growing and multiplying ever since. So the other day, as I said, when I pulled the big chunk off, I found that finally, after all this time, some is actually growing on the wood. So we'll have to wait and see how that does. And then in the meantime, we're going to let that grow back in and fill back in, so it kind of disguises all that jagged wood up there at the top again. The other point to notice in this tank is my whiptail catfish in the back there. Still looking good, still doing well. I meant to put some more cucumber in the tank because they were eating on it, but I just never got around to it. We did have some in the refrigerator the other day, but it's gone now. I was going to put some in this evening. So I'll get out to the grocery store tomorrow and I'll get cucumber, maybe some squash or something. I don't know. But we'll get something that's going to be dedicated just for my fish rather than for salads and drinks and everything else. So he's still looking good. My chocolate gourami in here, wherever it is still looking good. I saw it not too long ago down this end of the tank, and in fact, when I saw it, it was chasing one of the Corydoras catfish. There he is. I saw a glimpse of him way in that back corner. So he's back there somewhere. He's doing well, still eating. Occasionally I can get it to eat flake food, but usually I've got to put the tubifex worms or Daphne or something like that in there to get it to eat. So I don't really rely on it eating the flake food. And again, it seems unusual to me. Some gourami species can be kind of aggressive. The 3-spot color morphs are pretty nasty, but I don't think of the chocolate gouramis as being particularly aggressive. And on a couple of occasions now, I've actually seen it dash at the little cory cats on the bottom and sort of chase them away, which is interesting. Now, I've mentioned before that the chocolate gourami will also sort of nibble on the bits of algae wafer after the other fish nibble on it. It's almost like they have to nibble it up, and then the tiny little pieces, there he is, I was hoping he'd come out and make an appearance at some point. It's almost like the tiny little pieces that get broken up by the other fish is what it's looking for. So it seems like whenever it chases the cory cat and the cory cat dashes out of the way, the gourami swoops right back in and then starts picking at all the little pieces of debris that sort of kick up into the water column, kind of like it just did there. So it almost makes you wonder if it's not sort of a deliberate behavior of getting the cories, spooking the cories to get them to dash like that for the purposes of kicking some of that food up. That's interesting. I've never seen that timid little fish acting aggressive towards other animals before. I mean, it's the size of a postage stamp, and they're sort of known for being very docile species of gouramis, and yet I've seen it twice in the last 10 minutes or so dash after other fish. Interesting. Anyway, moving on. My 55-gallon T-bar tank. The only thing I've really got going on in here is my Anubias is blooming again. I've got more flowers. You can see 3 flower heads right there. There's actually more if you look in there and look a little more closely. I've got new leaves coming out on it, so the Anubias is doing really well in here. I kind of spread the substrate back out. I know it's hard to tell, but I really did when I did my water change earlier in the week. The T-bar just gets in there and rearranges the tank the way he likes it, which is fine. It's his tank, not mine, so I'm not the one that has to live in it. But occasionally I do get in there and sort of unrearrange it for him, and then I gives him something to do, rearranging it. Here's a good example of my Anubias doing well. You can see the white roots growing down there. You can see that new bundle right there in the center, if I'll ever focus. That is a new leaf about to unfurl. And then the crooked green thing up behind it is actually another one of the flower heads getting ready to open up. So lots of good stuff going on with the Anubias in this tank. It's growing like mad. The other thing we did in this tank this week is I dumped a bunch of eggshells in the back. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that now, but I'm doing it for the purposes of just adding a little bit of calcium and magnesium to the water. Again, we can reference the video from that. It's on my T-bar tank playlist if you want to look at it. But you can already see how you don't really notice the eggshells in the back anymore. That's one of the points I made in the video, was once the eggshells have been in there for a little while, you wouldn't really even notice the white granules on the black substrate like that, and we already really don't anymore, so yay. Now, moving on to my black ghost knifefish tank. I did see my black ghost knifefish come out for a brief moment last night, and we can actually see his little face sticking out right there. That little weird thing is his mouth, and his head, he's kind of lying at a 45-degree angle on his side. That sort of whitish part, well, he was. That little whitish part is the upper part of his lip, and then the dark part to the left is the bottom, if you're wondering how he's in there sort of oriented himself. So this tank has had an explosion of blue mystery snails. I traded some snails for some plants from one of my viewers, and I always thought mystery snails needed like special conditions, brackish water or something like that to breed, and I was mistaken. I was sorely mistaken. So I now have mystery snails galore in here. I scooped a bunch out for somebody today. I do sell these, and I got a bunch out and bagged them up, and then now I'm just seeing them everywhere again. I wish I had seen this many when I was looking for them this afternoon. I mean, this is like a party going on here in the corner. I would have put a lot more in the bag than I did if I had found this many in the tank. I was really kind of wondering why there were so few around when I was bagging them up. You can see there's one of the larger specimens right there crawling across that rock. That looks like probably Flash, my parkour action snail. Snail's insane. He zooms around the tank like nobody's business. I've never seen a snail move so fast. And he's really cool looking. I've never thought a snail would be so interesting, but when you look at his foot, if it ever focuses, look, there he goes. He's leaping from one surface to the next. When you look at his foot, it's really interesting looking part of his body. I always thought the snail shell was what you looked at when you admired a snail. But look at all the different markings and patternings on that foot. It's just really neat looking animal. So I am tickled pink with my acquisition there. I'm really happy with them. I just wish I had separated them and I didn't get 500 of them in the tank all at once, and you can see them just dropping off the glass. I've got so many of them in there. The upshot is the tank has never looked so clean. I gotta give it that. Can't argue about that. And real quick, we're going to back up here. I know that's unusual, but we are going to back up to get a little bit of a look at my high-finned spotted pleco. Because I swear this fish is a different species than the one I've got in my 125-gallon native tank. So get a good long look at this one. Notice any identifying features that you can. What I think is different looking is not only the coloration of the markings, but the shape of them. And now that I'm looking at this one a little closer, it actually sort of looks the same. They're sort of like little wiggly, squiggly lines, not dots. They're not spotted looking at all. They actually are sort of squiggly lines. So now if we come over here to my 125-gallon native tank, all we have to do is find the pleco, and I see it back there. We just have to wait till it comes out and makes an appearance. So hopefully it will come out in short order and we won't forget what we were just looking at. So it's swimming around back in there. I guess maybe that is the same species after all. There's always going to be some kind of variations in colors and markings no matter what two fish you look at. So I guess it's probably the same. We'll have to see. There's one crayfish. I just put 6 more crayfish in this tank yesterday. I'll go ahead and attach a card. It was a fairly long video. We went down to the stream, we collected them up, we brought them back, we got to look at a little bit of action inside the tank, as well as looking at them from this view outside the tank. There's a little bit more of a look. I don't know, I need one of these days I'm going to take a still photo and just do them side by side and really compare them. But I still question whether or not they're the same species of fish. Anyway, I can't see a crayfish there, but I see an antenna sticking out, or an antenna, I should say. So, yeah, I can see a crayfish crawling around under there. So there's another one. And And you think you'd see a little more, because I had at least 2 or 3 in the tank to begin with, and then I put 6 more in. And I'm just really not seeing them. So other than that, not a lot to talk about, so we're going to move on. No sense lingering over this tank. If you want to watch that video and see the crayfish and everything, as I said, I'll attach a card and you can check that out. So moving on to my snail tank here. Excuse me. Just chock full of snails, to say the least. I got snail eggs, I got snails everywhere, so no issues with that. And again, nothing really to talk about. It's snails, it's water, and I throw food in there every day, and that's pretty much all you got to do to breed snails. I don't think I've done a water change in that tank in over a year. When the water runs low, I just add to it, and eventually the snails just overrun it. This, of course, is my purple spotted gudgeon tank. I don't even see the gudgeon in there. Oh yeah, dude, there it is. It's hiding. This fish hides so easily right out in plain sight. I don't know how well it's coming out, but it's sitting dead center of your screen right now, hiding back there behind the rock. The camera's trying desperately to focus on it, but it can't figure out what it's trying to focus on. I think it's trying to focus on that rock. Anyway, that's my purple spotted gudgeon. I still have not done anything with the lighting on this tank. I really do need to get in there and fix it. It's not working properly, so it's really dim. And then, of course, I've also got the plants growing out of control, and that blocks a ton of light too, so got to get in there and do all that. Otherwise, nothing really going on in my black ghost knifefish tank. My 125 here just got a really big water change. I had boatloads of tannins in the tank. It looked like tea. The water was so stained. So we did the big water change, and then this whole entire end of the tank, I wound up plucking so many young water sprite out of here. By the time I was done, I eventually wound up just taking the whole entire mother plant and getting rid of it, but I did keep all of the offspring. So again, I've got lots of water sprite if anybody's interested in water sprite or java fern. I also plucked several little Apanageton babies, this little tall grassy looking stringy stuff here in front of us. So I do have a limited supply of them. I can't promise a big bag full of them like I give away big bags full of water fern and water sprite and java fern. But if you did want some plants and you're interested in the Apanageton, let me know. We can work something out. I can throw some of them in there with some other stuff or whatever. So that was a big change, huge water change, removal of all those plants, really, really opened up this end of the tank and really, really put a lot of light in there. So I'm liking that. Not really much else going on. Everybody's just kind of doing their thing, hanging out. I'm having a little bit of trouble with the plants at this end of the tank. Oh, I do have actually something to talk about in this tank now that I'm thinking about it. Can't really get these to root in and take. I'm not sure what they are, but every time I find them floating up at the surface, I tuck them in again, I put rocks up against them, and there should be like 3 or 4 of them all tucked down into that corner. I'm trying to get a little group of them going, and they're just not taking. I just keep finding them dug up and floating, and I'm not sure who's doing it. I don't know if it's him just sort of moving around, and like when he kicks, he moves some water when he decides he's going to dash from one end of the tank to the other. He certainly kicks up some stuff when he propels himself like that. So who knows, maybe that's knocking him loose. It's probably my synodontis down here, which likes to munch on the plants, and he probably just goes along and grabs and tugs on them and just uproots and pulls them right up, spits them out, and then they float up to the surface. So the thing that I have noticed in this tank, and I'm not able to find it at the moment, ever since I did a water change the other day, I noticed that one of my Congo tetras in here looks like it has a reasonably serious case of dropsy. Its fins, its scales are sort of pine coning a little bit, not crazy amount, but it is pine coning a little bit. Its eyes are bugged out, and it definitely just does not look right. But after the water change, which is what I think caused it, I've been just sitting back and waiting, and I'm really can't find it anywhere. I'm almost wanting to think it's this one down here because it was a smaller one, it was a female, and it always kind of kept to itself to some degree. I know it looks like it's with other fish, but these are rainbow fish, and that's a Congo tetra, so these are different species. So it was starting to look a little bit better over the last couple days, and when I last looked at it this morning, it actually looked like it was starting to get noticeably better, and now I'm just not seeing it in there anywhere. So either it's recovered, and that's why I can't find it, because it really is this one here, and it no longer looks all affected. And I think that's the case. I really think this one's gotten better. And I think that's because of the water change, the what causes dropsy in a lot of cases. Dropsy is, if it were a human, we would call that condition edema, or water retention, swelling that's caused by water. And one of the things that causes that in fish, actually that one back there might be it. Its eyes look a little bugged out, but it still looks way, way better than it did yesterday. But one of the things that causes that condition in fish is a sudden change in osmotic pressure. And when I did that really big water change yesterday, this tank has a little bit of that poultry grit in the filter. So the hardness in this tank does go up a little bit over time, not a lot. There we go. That's the rough looking one there. It was probably just swimming up near the surface and I wasn't able to see it. So no, it's not looking better at all. In fact, it's looking worse the way it's swimming. It physically doesn't look a lot worse, but that's a dead fish swimming right there. I'm definitely going to remove that from the tank now that I'm getting a better look at it. That's why I couldn't find it. It's up here swimming around near the top, and I can see its belly looks all red. So I definitely need to euthanize this one and put it out of its misery. I'll be doing that after this video is over. So probably not my original theory then, but one of the things that can cause dropsy in fish is a sudden shift in the osmotic pressure. So if you've got fairly hard water and you do a really big water change and you replace it with really soft water, that can cause a lot of bloating in a fish. It causes the fish to absorb a lot of water very quickly, and that can cause that dropsy, where the fish just swells up with water and its scales pine cone, its eyes bulge out. And what I was hoping was over a few days it would adjust to the water shift and it would get sort of back to normal. Now, just because I noticed it after the water change doesn't mean it wasn't like that before the water change. I just didn't notice it. So they are fairly old. I've had most of these Congo tetras for nearly 5 years now, and that's well within their lifespan. So it could be just getting old. It could be something else. I don't know, but it's the only fish in the tank that has any kind of issue whatsoever. So as I said, after this video is over, we're going to go ahead and get that out of there and euthanize that. But that is something that was worth mentioning in this video. My 20-gallon angelfish tank, I just did a water change on this tank. Likewise with the other one, simple water change, simple hang on the back filter change, and nothing else. And if you look right there on the glass, that's another one of my little clown plecos, and you can see the wood in this tank is all nice and shiny and clean. I also have a rubber lip in this tank in addition to that clown. So everybody in here is looking good other than the water change. Nothing really to report on. I'll give everybody a quick look at my two angels real quick. Looking gorgeous as always. I really thought the marbled one there would be the looker in the tank, but I now think it's this one back here. It doesn't come out on camera really well, but the one in the back has so much blue in its fins. It's absolutely stunning when you see it up close. Amazing looking angelfish. Really got lucky on that one. So my quarantine tank down here still just ticking over. I've still got those little coolie loaches. I got 2 of them in here. They just bury themselves in the gravel and I never see them unless I'm doing a water change or feeding the tank or something. The rest of those are live bearers. I got these also from the same viewer I got those blue mystery snails from. They needed a good home, and while I don't necessarily know where they're going to go yet, I will see to it that they get a good home, or at least the best I can give them. So far they're still in quarantine, looking good, eating fine, everything looks fine. They're just kind of in there waiting for a place to go. So moving on to my Brackish tank. I did a water change on this tank a few days ago also. And I also fixed the lighting on this tank. This was another tank that I had done that sort of cheap DIY LED stuff on it, and it wasn't working properly for various reasons. I'm not going to get into that now, but the lights were really dim on it. And yet, even at those really dim light, I was still starting to get some issues with the red cyanobacteria growing back. So just a couple days ago, I did a water change. I got in there and I vacked out a bunch of that cyanobacteria. I just used my siphon and just sucked the clumps right up off the bottom. And I even sucked a bunch of it off the front glass. And here it is like 3 days later, and look at it all in there. It's just starting to cover the bottom again. It's getting all over the glass. You can see a lot of that dark brown that's on the Java fern is not actually dead fern, but it's actually that brown, reddish brown growth. You can see the reddish color growing on the side wall over there, the side glass, whatever you want to call it, that reddish brown color on the Java there. So I've definitely got it in this tank. Once again, there's one of my little ghost shrimp. I know I've got at least 3 of them in here now because I saw 3 of them together earlier. So there might be more, but there's definitely still at least 3 ghost shrimp in here. So that's all that's really going on with Butterbean's tank here. There's Butterbean making a brief appearance. He's got a little scratch on his forehead. It's healing up nicely, but I think he got it during the water change. I think he got a little startled and smacked into something when he tried to dash away. He's still really skittish after all these years. It's just weird how skittish he is for a fish that is, puffers are traditionally pretty, they can be aggressive fish, if not outgoing at least. And he's just, he's a skittish fish. I definitely walk into the room sort of gently so I don't spook him and startle him too much when I come in, because I really don't like stressing him out and upsetting him too much. So that was it for the periphery, and then now we have the center garden area. So let me fire up the sun. And this tank is kind of being stripped down, sort of. I've taken the hostas that were in the back outside already. The daylilies were kind of done. They were down here on the floor, so they're gone and outside. It's kind of progressing through the summer, and a lot of this stuff is sort of progressing through its normal natural cycle as well. This hosta here is kind of yellowing and fading. That's partially from being put in so much sun so much all of a sudden, and I've also kind of neglected watering it on a few occasions, and it's really dried out. My creeping Jenny over here is just going nuts. It's growing crazy all over everything. And then up here, likewise, it's just growing really dense and compact. I had to get rid of the stuff up top. I had powdery mildew growing on it. In the tank, I've got a lot of strange looking growth. Although you can't really see it at the moment. It just looks like green algae. But as of yesterday, there was... I want to say it looks like a stuff called, I know this is going to sound disgusting, I don't know what its real name is, but it's called rock snot. And it's a certain kind of algae. I don't know if that's what it was or not, but we do have that in Maryland. It's an invasive species, but it typically grows in pristine water. It's a really unusual sort of algae that fixes its own nitrogen. And it actually grows in water. It thrives in water that is pristine and has no nitrates in it whatsoever. So some of our rivers around here, like the Gunpowder, for example, have issues with that, and we have to be very careful about transporting boats from one body of water to another, or if we've been wading or using, waders or fishing boots or something, we've got to be careful about going from one body of water to the next to prevent transporting that stuff around. So that's what it looked like was on the rocks as of yesterday, and now it looks like it's just back to green algae. So, I don't know, but I like it. I don't, if anybody thinks like I need to do something about all that algae in the tank, like are you kidding me? That looks awesome. It actually looks like a real outside natural environment, which is what I want it to look like. So, I'm really happy with the way it looks so far. But as I said, we're kind of in the middle of breaking it down. We do have a ton of really good looking creeping Jenny going on back here too. And then this is just my catnip, because the cats always like the catnip. And then down here, finally, we'll have a look at my red-clawed crab tank, or at least as best we can. The glass really needs to be wiped down. And I know it's hard to tell, but there is a ton of little babies in there. I know you could see some of them swimming around, but there's a lot of little tiny ones in there too. So probably going to have to do something about that. I just scooped a bunch of fish out and threw them in there, so I very obviously threw males and females in there. So there you go. We'll start putting some other kinds of plants in here soon, maybe working on this, whatever. We got plenty of time. It's been some really nice weather recently, so I've been spending a lot more time outside than inside. But nonetheless, we've made it all the way around the world, a little more than half an hour. So thanks for joining me, everybody. Hope that wasn't too long for you. There you get to look at the reflection of my legs. That's why I turned that center console light off, because that's the kind of reflection you see in the tanks if I don't. It's terrible. So, alright everybody, thanks again for watching. Make sure you subscribe. Don't forget we start here every time at my 29-gallon miscellaneous tank. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you real soon in the next one.